Welcome, everyone, to episode 120 of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, the second most brilliant podcast host of the 25th century. But, I am not here to cover this pair of movies, ? Alone. No, I'm not. I see someone from across the way. Oh, is that my old friend, Steve Man, Guntley Man?
Yes, it is me, Steve Van Guntley Man, and wouldst thou like to hear a dirty jest? This is the podcast about Cenobite children, R-rated history, and dino laxatives. That's because this is the podcast about Josh Kirby, Time Warrior, the long-running... I had this identified as Moonbeam incorrectly. This is actually not.
This is not a Moonbeam.
Series.
Yeah,
this
we
is
have
a
it in the
Kushner-Lock
spreadsheet.
full moon.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is a serial starring a preteen adventurer. And today we are looking at the first 2 out of 6 films in this series, Planet of the Dino-Knights and The Human Pets. So very excited to be cracking into this. This series has been kind of like clogging up our spreadsheet for a little bit, mostly just because all of the titles are incredibly long. And so they stand out like in our little spreadsheet. And I've never really known what these are. I assumed they were like Moonbeam, like kiddie films, and they kind of are, but they're also a little stranger than that.
You're not wrong, Steve. They have been clogging up our spreadsheet because, like Moonbeam stuff, I feel like it's a lot of times for us sort of an afterthought. Like people have come to us and been like, oh, I'm interested in doing Prehysteria 2, or I'm interested in doing Remote or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I know people have a reverence for this Moonbeam stuff, but when it comes to looking at the spreadsheet and planning ahead, it's like, oh, Josh Kirby. All right, Moonbeam. Yeah, eventually we'll get there. It's the same thing with all the Evil Bong sequels. It's like they're just taking up so much real estate in the spreadsheet, and we've been trying to the best of our ability to completely ignore them.
Right. We just need to kind of like rip the Band-Aid on these, that like because I don't know. I wasn't necessarily looking forward to diving into this series, but I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff to cover here.
Sure.
And yeah, we're going guestless today. We're just kind of like breaking it out and introducing this series. And kind of get it out there. So let's start by talking about Josh Kirby, ellipses, Time Warrior, ! Now, the first movie, it's called Chapter 1, Planet of the Dino-Knights. It was released October 24th, 1995. It's directed by Ernest Farino. It's written by Paul Calisi, Ethan Reif, and Cyrus Voris. And it stars Corbin Allred, Barry Ingham, Jennifer Burns, Derek Webster, John DeMita, Spencer Rochefort, Time Winters, and little baby Charisma Carpenter. A very young Charisma Carpenter appears in one scene in this movie. Excuse me. Now, the Josh Kirby series is actually kind of one of the more ambitious undertakings that Charles Band and Full Moon have ever embarked upon. I think the model for this is obviously a little bit of Saturday morning action cartoons or action series like Power Rangers. There's a heap and help and a Doctor Who in here. There's a little bit of like the Sam Raimi Hercules, because remember those started as like syndicated movies before it got turned into a series. So there's a little bit of all of that kind of calculus going on.
Oh, there's also some Buck Rogers and
very much
some,
so.
What's that? Radar Men from the Moon? Commando
yeah.
Cody,
Lots of
like that. Yeah.
Golden Age DC Comics and lots of stuff like that. This thing is very, very laden with references that they're not even really trying to be subtle about. In some cases, just straight up ripping off by their own admission.
At what point does something stop being a reference?
Yeah, and just being the thing, yeah.
Right. I mean, at what point is Josh Kirby Time Warrior no longer a reference to Rip Hunter Time Master?
That's the thing. Yeah, it's not exactly that big of a leap to see where it came from. But Charles Band wanted to produce a serialized adventure for kids, but he didn't really have a strong pitch beyond that. So he did the most Charles Band thing imaginable, which is that he commissioned a series of posters inspired by sci-fi pulp magazines of like the 30s through the 50s. And the only direction that he gave the artists is that each poster had to include a young boy and some friends to demonstrate that they were all connected, right? Other than that, he's like, go nuts. Well, do whatever you want, make whatever it's cool, and we'll figure out how to make it work. And the people that they brought in to make it work were 2 screenwriters named Ethan Reif and Cyrus Voris. They were still undergrads at NYU when they started shopping around their script called Demon Knight, and it started getting a little buzz. The movie was eventually to become the first Tales from the Crypt feature film, which fucking rules.
One of my favorite movies.
I love Billy Zane in that movie so much. That is such a crazy fun performance.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much besides just that performance to love too. But I'm glad that we're getting an opportunity to talk about Cyrus Voris and Ethan Rife, simply to give us any excuse to mention Demon Knight on the show. Like,
absolutely,
as
yeah.
soon
There's
as I
not a lot
saw
of crossover.
Right. As soon as I read who this was written by, or like the kind of origin story of Josh Kirby as this serialized adventure, I was like, okay, great. Like, we have a connection to Demon Knight, which is a movie that I watch at least once a year.
Yeah.
Probably truly one of my favorite movies with one of my favorite performances, as you already alluded to.
Yeah.
And here we are getting a chance to talk about it in, of all places, Josh Kirby, Time Warrior. In this Dino-Knights movie, which I kind of love the conceit that I guess it predated Jurassic Park Mania, but I don't know if you remember this, Steve. Do you remember Dino Riders?
That rings a bell. I
So
remember Dino City.
there was this obsession with like taking ancient creatures like dinosaurs, but having them be sort of like futuristic or having them be appropriated into another time period. Like
Yeah.
Dino Riders was basically like dinosaurs as pets and like battle animals for like these future like cyborg people. It was one of those, it was by, I'm pretty sure it was Tycho who did them. And it was an action figure line. And when you bought the action figure line at like Sears,
Mm-hmm.
it came with a VHS tape with like the pilot of the animated show that went along with it. So it was like heavily merchandising, like this is going to turn into a big thing. And the VHS had like the pilot and two other episodes on it. And I don't know that other ones were produced. Like it just didn't
Probably
catch on.
not.
It kind of
Yeah.
just fizzled out, you know. But I love the fact that this kind of stemmed from that same thinking. It's like, okay, I'm gonna just kind of, to pull from South Park. It's like the manatee dropped two balls together that were like dinosaurs and medieval knights. Make a poster happen.
It's totally that. It's totally that. I also did not realize, I was just doing a little deeper dive. Rife and Voris, the screenwriting team, also went on to create DreamWorks Kung Fu Panda. So they found some pretty huge.
Oh, I did know that. You know
in
what?
their
I forgot
career.
till you said that. I forgot that, but I did know that connection.
That's pretty crazy. I did not know that. But they were actually originally brought in to talk to Charles Band because he was looking for some young fans who were really into comic books who could write a sequel to Dr. Mordred, which we've talked about before. There were many failed attempts to get a franchise of Dr. Mordred off the ground. Unfortunately, it never happened. But halfway through that meeting, according to the memories of Reef and Voris, Band abruptly shifted gears and started showing them the posters that he'd commissioned. He asked them if they'd be interested in writing a series that would find a way to connect all these very odd images, which ranged from soldiers riding dinosaurs to mushroom people to space giants to living toys, all of this weird stuff. The pitch reminded Voris of an old DC comic series he read called Rip Hunter, ... Time Master. And when he mentioned it, according to the recollection from the interview in Dave J's book, it came from the video aisle, Charles Band lit up and realized that this was actually the thing he was trying to reference the entire time. He could not remember the name of it, but it was clearly something that he read when he was young and kind of like, those things that you like store them away and then like, oh my God, I totally remember. Like, I'm sure
Like Dino Riders?
Like Dino Riders. I was going to say, I'm sure some
Which,
people are at home like, fuck, Dino Riders.
you know what? And they can put down their angry tweets because I looked it up and there were 14 episodes of it that aired, and it was shown in first run syndication. Disney acquired it, and it was now part of like the Marvel Action Universe programming block. And the main voice was Stephen Dorff.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Yeah. He was a child actor. People forget he was in Gate. Yeah. Or The Gate, excuse me. Yeah, but they told him, they're like, oh, okay, so do you want us to do like kind of an homage to Rip Hunter? And apparently Charles Band said, no, I want you to do a ripoff, which is a great little story that they included in there. So they took that challenge seriously, and they even originally considered using the name Time Master instead of Time Warrior. They eventually pulled it back, but they used the opportunity to lace the series with a ton of deep cut comic references and film nerd lore. So, for example, Josh is named Kirby after Jack Kirby, the great comic book artist. Dr. Zoetrope is a reference to American Zoetrope, the Francis Ford Coppola
Ooh, help me,
company.
Dr. Zoetrope.
And there's the main weapon in this is the nullifier, which is straight out of Fantastic Four. The ultimate nullifier is like a big thing in Marvel Comics history. So they're
There's
not really
also
being subtle about
there's
it.
a Ditko one in there too, right?
The Ditkonians, yeah, they say
Yeah,
something
yeah.
about Ditkonians. They say like she references the Code of Kang or something, which is another like Fantastic Four character.
Well, don't
So
blame
yeah.
me, Steve. I voted for Kodos.
So apparently the pair had originally pitched 10 chapters, but Band reduced that to 6 90-minute films, which he envisioned as kind of a syndicated serial for home video. And this required the team to pull together 6 feature-length scripts in 6 months, which was not going to be possible. So the producers assembled a kind of writer's room to sort of manage the load. Reif and Voris were going to be kind of the head writers overseeing the creative direction overall, and then they would have individual writers and directors come in. So Planet of the Dino-Knights was actually meant to be the second chapter of the series. The human
You
pets.
don't say.
I know, right? The human pets, which we're also going to talk about, was going to be the first. But then in 1993, part riding this kind of wave, like you said, like Dino Riders and Denver the Lost Dinosaur and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were really prevalent in pop culture for kids at this time. So Albert Band apparently had the idea of like, let's front load the dinosaurs, like that worked out really well for us with Prehysteria, which, as we've covered, is still the highest grossing film in Full Moon's history. And so they're like, yeah, okay, but that also required them to basically excise the whole introductory chapter from the second movie, transplant it into the Dino-Knights movie, which was already written as like a 90-minute film. So what we get here is
Yep.
an introduction, a long introduction, kind of like setting the table for what we're going to get. We get the first half of the Dino-Knights adventure, and then Human Pets is actually only half Human Pets, okay? Because we get half of the Dino-Knights adventure wrapping up in that, and then it leads very abruptly into the Human Pets adventure, which was written to be shorter to accommodate that intro sequence. So it's really chopped up.
Very apparent. And it does this thing. I noticed this happens. A product of that is that it plays a lot like syndicated, or not even just syndicated, but network television shows used to do too. And I always forget that this was kind of the style of doing this and the time I was really kind of like jarred by it was doing a kind of series watch of the Rockford Files, which is an old show, which was in the 70s. And what it would do is each new episode would start with like a 2-minute montage of like action sequences from that episode to like whet your appetite for what you're about to see during the next hour. And I always found that so odd because the episodes would start and it took me a few episodes to remember, oh, this is how they do this. Because stuff would start happening and it would be in a montage. And I'd be like, wait, I don't remember that.
Right.
That didn't happen in the last episode. Like, who is this person? They're just introduced with no context. And it was such a bizarre way. And I got vibes of that watching Josh Kirby too, because it was like, I'm Josh Kirby, blah blah blah, and then it's like flash forward to like stuff that happens later, and then it has to come back and kind of start from the beginning again. And choppy is the right way to describe it. Like, but it gave syndicated Xena, Hercules vibes in that way. I definitely was like, I could have seen this totally, could have worked as we didn't in our kind of stew of what everything that's thrown together to make this movie. Did we mention Sliders also?
Sliders is a good comparison. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
this is kind of like a Junior Baby Sliders, I mean, each of these movies opens with like an opening credit sequence. There's like a very long kind of preamble explaining the whole plot, and then we get a
Yeah.
credit sequence of like them doing the same thing. So it feels very much like a syndicated TV show. So Josh Kirby, the title character, is played by Utah native Corbin Allred, who at this time had only had roles in Robin Hood Men in Tights. He had one scene in that playing a parody of Macaulay Culkin, and the MST3K classic Quest for the Delta-Knights, which is one of my favorite MST3K episodes. Irwin 1138, the kind of Doctor Who style character who is kicking off this whole adventure, is played by a classical British theater actor named Barry Ingram. If that name sounds familiar to folks of a certain age, it's because he is the voice of the title character in Disney's The Great Mouse Detective. That's right. He is Basil of Baker Street. Never knew what that guy looked like.
Didn't think I'd have the opportunity until this episode to talk about my fondness for The Great Mouse Detective.
And I love that movie.
Here I am. I love that movie. It was like one of the first Disney movies I really liked. And it was, people will always go back to The Little Mermaid as the start of sort of the golden era of the revival of Disney. Because if you look, at the early 80s, they were coming off a bunch of bombs and a
Black
bunch of
Cauldron and Fox and the Hound.
Black Cauldron and those. I mean, Fox and the Hound is one that was like, I don't know. I think it was sort of like critically lauded, but financially ruinous for this. I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly, but I remember it maybe just was disappointing in terms of box office, and obviously a lot of live action stuff and mixed live action animation stuff during there. But Black Cauldron was sort of the nadir of Disney at that time, and Great Mouse Detective was successful. And it didn't make Little Mermaid money, but it made money, and it kind of ushered in the start of that new era of animation in Disney. So I like to give it credit for that. And Vincent Price as Ratigan, like, come on.
That was my introduction to Vincent Price. Yeah, that was my first exposure to him. So
great.
That movie's real fun.
If I know anything about you, Steve, based on our conversations about Final Destination,
I
know you love a Rube Goldberg death machine, and Great Mouse Detective has a good one.
Oh, it absolutely does. No, I love those. Derek Webster was cast to play the nefarious Dr. Zoetrope, which is, as we mentioned, a reference to Francis Ford Coppola's production company. Webster was a fairly recent theater school grad at the time, and he's still a steadily working character actor. He's apparently a main cast member on the Jeremy Renner show Mayor of Kingstown, which is one of those 100 million Taylor Sheridan shows that apparently are crazy successful, but I've never seen a frame of. So
I think my wife and I watched the pilot, or maybe the first 2 episodes, and we're like, okay, that's not a bad show, but there was nothing inherently stand out about it that made us want to go back to it. We kind of just forgot about it, and then we whatever itch we had was scratched by Mobland.
Yeah, most of what I know about those shows is that every time I was watching something on Paramount Plus, there would be an ad for the Stallone one. I forget what that one is. Tulsa King, yeah. And it became a joke in our house because there's a line in it where it's like, what do you know about wind turbines? And Stallone goes, I know they blow. Just says it exactly like that. And so we just kept quoting that in my house. It's like, I know they blow. Jennifer Burns plays Azabeth Siege, a good sci-fi fantasy name. She followed this up with a few episodes of Power Rangers before retiring from acting permanently in 2000. Good for her. I always like it when actors are when they voluntarily tap out, when they're like, yeah, no, this isn't for me. I'm going to go live a normal life and be happy. And I hope that is what she's doing. So this is a strange one. I was actually pretty on board with it when it got started. I'm like, okay, this is dialed at a level that had I seen this when I was 10 years old or 12, whenever it was when this came out, I would have been very into it. It seems, it's got all the kind of touchstones that I would be into. It's a kid adventurer with floppy hair, and there's a pretty girl who's a ass kicker, and there's all kinds of weird creatures and monsters and robots, and there's all kinds of stuff here that I would have glommed onto, but it's a I think the editing really did this series dirty, especially these first two.
100%.
Maybe it smooths out as we go beyond this, but like the pacing on these are so weird. I hit a real wall with Quest of the the Planet of the Dino-Knights like about midway through. I'm like, I was on board. I'm like, oh, okay, now we're going into like medieval knights, and the ass kicking female warrior that we just met is immediately a damsel in distress, and like and it just plods to a crawl. Like I did not care about this feudal land battle between these two brothers. Like I don't know.
No,
I was not involved.
I want to see these knights mounted on the back of a dinosaur.
Yeah, exactly.
And
That's all I
you just
needed.
don't get a lot of that. I agree with you 100% in that if this had come out in like 1991 instead of 1995,
Yeah,
I probably would have stumbled upon the VHS of this and been like, what's this? And it would have been, you know, one of those things when you're a non-discerning enough viewer as a kid that you can't really tell the difference between what's an A movie, B movie, anything that exists in a format is just a movie and they're all equal in your eyes. Like that would have been how I was watching this. And like you said, a lot of the elements of it are great. And, I was a red-blooded American boy in the early 90s. I loved a dinosaur as much as the next guy.
sure.
Like, I would have totally been on board for this, but you're right, because it is 100% the editing of this movie that kind of kills it. Like, I don't begrudge anyone the nostalgic connection to it. If you were someone who watched it at age 12 in 1995 and were like, oh man, I love those Josh Kirby movies. Remember those? And you talk fondly about them. Like, there is a lot
Yeah,
in here to like, but I think, yeah, that's the thing though, when you're operating in this medium, like, yeah, we love Lucy Lawless. We love Kevin Sorbo a lot less. But like those shows, there's some real like peaks and valleys in there. Like it's not you encounter a dud, here and there.
yeah,
And a lot of times in those shows it can be in the pilot. It can be in the first couple episodes while the show is kind of finding its footing. And I
yeah.
think this is sort of like a Frankenstein's monster pilot that has been doctored in such a way that it's like you're about an hour in and you're like, I thought this was about dinosaurs. I thought this was about knights. There's a lot of other stuff going on. And, I'm not saying I'm ready to segue yet into the second part, but I'm going to hit the same wall in the second part too,
Yeah.
because just when you feel like should be getting momentum, it cuts back to footage from the first introduction that you've already seen.
That's the
Like,
thing. Okay.
come on, man.
I think we can safely kind of like merge our conversations on these two movies because they are functionally just like one long movie with a weird like tag at the end of it that kind of and again we hit the same problem, like you said, about halfway through the plot switches up and it just slows to a crawl, but really most of the first half of this is just kind of getting to know Josh and all that, and we don't really get to know him very well, honestly. He's kind of like a high status nerd in his high school, so he's like the cool guy, but like he still gets bullied, he's kind of like the extreme sports kid who speaks his mind, but he's still getting picked on. So it's kind of like the Andrew Garfield version of Peter Parker, kind of the yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely like not a jock and not like the most popular kid, but he's got that JTT haircut going. Like
He
he's
does, yeah.
obviously got, like people who are, and she's kind of a cool kid. He's got the second in command nerdier friend who's established, because like it's sort of like the evil Ed to his Charlie Brewster. Like,
okay, I think I might have missed something with this kid. Okay, because his name was Irwin too, wasn't it?
yes.
Like, okay, and then the main Doctor Who type character is Irwin 1138. So is it implied that like this is him from an
I don't
alternate
know
dimension?
if I don't know if there's an implication there or not.
Okay, yeah, I was like, were they not able to think of another name? Like, what's going on? Maybe that pays off later on, and we're just kind of getting ahead of it. But it feels a little too obvious to not be referenced. Like, it's not going to be a twist, It's like, oh, the one other character named Irwin has a plot stake in this movie about time travel and alternate dimensions. Like, yeah.
Yeah, like and they introduce some interesting stuff, like the conversations he's having with his father And then the whole thing about like the rated R history at school. Like I would have loved if this thing wrapped up quicker and we were back at the school again, after the fact. Like, but we just don't really get there. These threads are kind of just dropped. And this movie and the second one have one of the oddest crediting or lack of crediting, which is that there is the concubine whose name is Jennifer, and
Yes,
her name is said
multiple times.
4,000 times throughout these two movies. Yet in IMDb, the actress, I believe, is Sandra Guibord.
Yeah.
She is just credited as Mistress. And I'm like, why does this character
Why?
not have a name? Like, why is she not credited as, if anything, Lord Henry's concubine or Jennifer, comma, Lord Henry's concubine? Like, she's referred to by name so many times, and then she's not named in the IMDb credits of this movie. I find it so strange.
Yeah.
Like, she's a major part of both of the movies. She's on screen a lot. I would dare to say she's on screen, at least in the first one and the first half of the second one, as much as Azabeth Siege is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like it needs to be mentioned too that like a lot of the back half of this Dino-Knights movie is spent watching a creepy older man lusting after someone who is coded as a teenage girl. Like they don't say what her age is, but she is presented as like a love interest to Josh Kirby, who is 14. All right. So like
Right.
it's real creepy. It's not fun.
She's got
And
to be
it's just
17 or younger then by setting those rules, I would say.
right. Yeah, exactly. And that's just kind of a creepy line to walk, you know. And I generally think like the performances in this are fairly solid across the board. I think
Yeah.
everybody's kind of locked into the tone of this thing, you know, like the
Mhm.
the villain character, which it's so funny if you look at some of the VHS artwork, they always have like Josh, Irwin, Azabeth, villain. There's always like one little
It's so
slot.
good.
They clearly just didn't even fill in the name for any of them, but each one of these VHS covers has an extra slot for just villain with a picture of them, which is really funny. I will say, but we didn't really shout it out, but the poster art is great. The poster art is really
Oh
fun.
yeah.
I
I will say
enjoy these
there's
images that they created.
yeah. There's areas where this is very successful. Again, we've been nitpicking. Well, we have fair complaints, fair
Fair
grievances. I wouldn't
complaints.
necessarily
Yeah,
call
yeah,
it
yeah,
nitpicking, but
yeah,
there is a lot that this does well, especially for how ambitious we mentioned before. This is an ambitious project, and to get all 6 feature length movies like this done in that time frame for that budget, based on the little bit of guidance, is pretty
yeah,
impressive. Like, and I think it captures the aesthetic, like especially in the poster art, like you mentioned, excellent. I think it really does capture the aesthetic. I think it's one of the times where there was an idea, not just in terms of content, but in terms of tone and vibe and look, and where they nailed it. It was like, this is how the poster is going to look. This is the aesthetic we want. We nailed it. Okay, we want this to play like a family friendly sci-fi fantasy in the vein of Doctor Who or Sliders or Hercules or Xena. Nailed it in that sense.
yeah.
Narratively, does it always work? Not necessarily, but this is one of those times where like the assignment was do this and they did this. Like they,
Right.
and it's kind of an impressive feat, if I'm being honest, because you could see this being like a Monsters Reborn type thing where it's like, oh, what
Yeah,
is our ambition? Our ambition is to do 10 of these. Okay, well, that's not doable. Okay, great. Let's slash it down to 6 of them. Okay, 6 sounds good. Oh, wait, how many are we going to do? 2. No, they
yeah,
did 6. Like,
yeah.
and good
No,
on
they did
them.
them. No, they knocked them all out. I think they shot them all pretty quickly. These were, of course, all shot in Romania, as many of the Kushner-Lock era full moon movies were at the time. The one exception was the establishing shot at the beginning of Josh's neighborhood, and that's actually in Corbin Allred's real neighborhood in Utah. So, that's kind of one of the few American shots that we get in a full moon movie at this time.
Correct
And
me if I'm wrong,
apparently,
but is that the same neighborhood as Pet Shop?
I was thinking the same thing. It looks a lot like Pet Shop. I would not be surprised if it's the same neighborhood. But apparently when they went to Romania, they built like a little suburban village, a little suburban neighborhood so that they could use for establishing shots. And as kind of a sign of where Romania was at this time, remember that Subspecies shot there. It was the first American production to shoot in Romania, and that was 1991, I believe. Yeah, so right around there. And things were just coming off of this huge revolution. Things were gradually starting to get back into like a healthier place, but a lot of people were still displaced. And apparently the set designers had a big problem with a lot of squatters, a lot of people coming in and living in these little houses, because in many of these neighborhoods, these were the nicest houses. These fake facades were like nicer than a lot of what people had to live in at the time. So Romania's come a long way, and that's kind of been the interesting thing of watching a lot of these movies too, is that we can sort of see that progression. We can see it in real time as it's getting better. But yeah, that was kind of a struggle that they had. But yeah, we get a couple of good like stop motion effects. I thought they might be Dave Allen. They're not. They're Chris Endicott though, who is like Dave Allen's protege,
Oh yeah,
basically.
absolutely.
And they look great. They're really fun. There's some fun model work, with the dinosaurs with saddles and stuff like that.
Yeah,
we just didn't get enough of that. I thought,
I got a kick every time like Dr. Zoetrope showed up and he looked like Sam Richardson's like cyborg that wants to kill Skeletrex.
Yeah, exactly. Damn you, Skeletrex. Oh yeah, no, there's very much a lot of that.
I still can't get over the crediting of Mistress. It's so funny because like even the actress Mary Pat Green, who basically played Bunty from Disenchantment, who's like the lady in waiting, has a credit.
Oh yeah.
And it's just man, it's so funny. I feel bad for that actress. I think similarly to Jennifer Burns, she is someone who didn't really like stay in acting.
No, not really. And this has a classic kind of blend of like high and low production values, where it's like, all right, we clearly put some effort into some of like the props design and some of the stuff, but then there's also a lot of very visible strings. We get this little creature named Prism, who is kind of this little munchies looking troll doll kind of thing that has magical powers and sort of is the Deus Ex Machina whenever they need something solved. Prism
Munchies is such an apt comparison. It's like Prism should be like on a surfboard in the sky with like a piece of pizza and a Coke in his hand.
He very much has that vibe. Yeah. But yeah, that was just all the big problem. Like I love that their gun, the gun that they came up with, like Barry's or Irwin's gun, is basically just a cane. So you have to like grip it from the top and like squeeze it, and it doesn't look cool. And the laser only comes out of it about half the time. Like the laser effect, like sometimes they include it and sometimes they don't. So it's got that like nice little blend of high and low production values that kind of makes this sort of thing charming. But yeah, no, but the pacing just was absolutely deadly. This needed to be 1 hour at most. This needed to be a Film Monsters style, like really leaning into the Goosebumps vibes and just saying like, okay, this is a 1 hour serial. We're going to cut it off right there. And yeah, I understand the calculus behind front loading the dinosaurs, but it was a mistake. It was a mistake. That movie was too long on its own. Splitting it up the way that they did, a lot of serials will do that. Like that's kind of the thing. Serials will end on a cliffhanger so you can pick it up for the next one, but they don't devote an entire 45 minutes to an hour to resolving the cliffhanger. The cliffhanger is resolved in the first few minutes, and then they go on their next adventure. And that's kind of what I was expecting.
This thing almost plays like a 2 hour pilot.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Yeah, it plays really long, and yeah, it just kills a lot of the momentum. I think they should have kept it with the intro sequence being stuck with human pets, and human pets is not that strong of a story, but it's it is the appropriate length. Yeah, let's talk about the human pets. I think this came out I think only a few weeks apart, or 1 week apart. Yeah, they all, yeah, it's
sounds
1 week
right.
apart. Yeah, they all just came out like back to back like that, and it's mostly the same cast. But yeah, there's this incredibly clunky transition between the first and second movies. Well, first of all, we should mention the human pets was just full on the name of a Rip Hunter adventure. Like straight up, that was the name of it. The concept of large bald aliens keeping humans in a little cage. That's exactly from the cover of that. Like, this is where we're verging into no longer an homage and just straight up rip off. But you know, that's fine. Whatever. For this, like, that's totally fine. It's sort of a classic. Wasn't there like a classic Star Trek or something that followed this sort of formula too?
Probably.
Like
I'm not
Twilight Zone.
Well, so yes. So as far as Star Trek, the original series goes, I don't know a whole lot about it. But I was going to say this one basically turns into, at one point, 5 characters in search of an exit, which is a very classic Twilight Zone episode where there are a bunch of sort of like narrative archetypes who wake up in a room not really knowing why they're there or how they got there. And it, you know, not just to spoil a 60-something-year-old episode of television.
You're fine.
They are the doll collection at like a donation place, essentially, where like a girl comes and takes one of the characters out of the room. And that is really what this is aping once they're dropped into, you know, these little kind of miniatures. I was gonna say miniatures, but then also obviously like, you know, large exaggerated sets, the way we saw during like Doll Man versus Demonic Toys or something like that. But you know, a lot of it is just forced. No, I don't want to say forced perspective necessarily, but a lot of it is just like people in these alien costumes who, to their detriment, just look way too much like Paul Schaefer.
Yeah, they do. They really do. I kept thinking I called them baby Cenobites because they look so much like Butterball.
Yes.
You know, and but the transition from the Dino-Knights adventure, which again, I must emphasize, in a 90-minute movie, they take 1 full hour to wrap up the Dino-Knights adventure. Okay, that's way too much real estate.
We were like 40 minutes into the second movie, and Josh Kirby's getting knighted after like a 10-minute long sword fight, and I'm just like, why are we still here?
Yeah,
like,
why are we still here?
We're still in the first movie.
This movie is called The Human Pets. We've seen nothing about that.
This is still the first adventure. Like, there's a lot of broadsword play and swashbuckling sort of going on, and I'm just like, I was ready for it to fully shift gears. Like, I was ready for it to be like, oh, well, they're through the vortex or whatever it's called again, and where are they going to get spit out? Oh, now they're in the year 70,000, whatever, and there's these giant aliens. Great, let's get there. 45 minutes into this movie, they're just starting to get away from the medieval aspect of it, which should have been wrapped up in like a maybe 5 to 10 minute sequence in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. It takes entirely too long, and the way that we get back to the human pet story, or the way that we transition into it, is Dr. Zoetrope shows up, and I want to say, great armor, great like robot mech armor. I think it actually looks very good, and it's like fun to just like walk around it. I'm still not quite clear on what Dr. Zoetrope's deal is. Like, he's like a young man, and doesn't come across like as inherently like menacing. So I'm wondering if we're going to get some kind of like twist at the end that like he was always working alongside them or something like that. I don't know. There's just an odd vibe.
Having a lot of random beakers hanging in his lair.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't love a beaker? But he shows up as they're about to leave. He shoots this little time dealie that Josh has on his wrist, and then fade to black, fade back up. Josh is falling through a time tunnel outside of the ship. Why? We have no idea. Fade to black again. They are on a desert planet. A gigantic alien leans over and picks them up. Fade to black again. This is 3 seconds. I clocked it. This is 3 seconds of setting this up, and it is jarring.
It's kind of hilarious because he just starts falling, and it's like that scene in the Treehouse of Horror where Homer's like, "I'm the first non-Brazilian person to travel backwards through time."
Right? Yeah.
And he's just there.
He's just there. Yeah, it's just like, it's crazy. It's really abrupt, and I understand, like this is just where we're seeing like the editing decisions kind of really kicking this thing in the ass, because we don't have any kind of like entryway into what's going on in this story. So immediately I'm not involved. Immediately I don't care. And then, we get the real goofy kind of like giant set props, like, sub doll man kind of stuff, where it's just like, oh, here, let's just put them in this box next to a gigantic paintbrush, and that will demonstrate that they are tiny. And then they pull kind of like a night at the museum sort of idea of like, oh, we've got little guys from all different points in time, and we're going to make them fight each other. And they immediately do.
Yeah.
I like that, like the cowboy and the World War I soldier just immediately get behind boxes 3 feet apart and start trading shots, like bam, 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 like just back and forth like that.
Yeah, that was silly and fun. That was
Yeah.
kind of that was the tone of where I expected this thing to go, maybe 15 minutes in,
Yeah.
not an hour in.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where was all of this, earlier? Like, I did not care about the Dino-Knight stuff, especially because that has no bearing on anything, nothing from the Dino-Knight stuff carries over into this story. And then things slow down even further when they finally start working together with the other like tiny little guys, like there's no more conflict that's really that necessary. And so we have to spend a lot of time watching Josh and Azabeth recap things that happened in the last movie, which we were technically still in, like it's still one big long movie. And we're like, I didn't need to go back and see that he was being bullied briefly. It's not important to anything. Like, we saw this already. I don't know. It felt like there was maybe 5 minutes of story here.
Yeah, after the variety of characters who are in this little alien zoo are done fighting with each other, it becomes Josh monologuing, and then them, working together to fix machinery for what seems like a very long time. But Steve, a wise song once taught me that we can do anything by working with each other.
Exactly.
And they take that mantra and they work together to escape from this alien zoo. I also appreciate how the alien designs, like they have lobster claws, like they're kind of like Zoidbergs also.
They are kind of big Zoidbergs, yeah.
They've got like obviously you can't put like fitting clothes on them, so they always just have some sort of like I don't know, like a robe, like they all kind of remind me of like Wildor, like they're looking for the cosmic key.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for referencing that. Jesus Christ.
That's
For anyone under the age of 40,
yeah,
like if you have no idea what I'm talking about there, that's fine.
That's fine. Yeah, you're okay.
Fine.
You're good.
Move
You're
on.
good. You don't need it. And I would say that's generally pretty true of this second Josh Kirby movie. Like, I'm not even like out on the series. I'm thinking like it might smooth out a little bit as we're getting past this very clunky intro couple of movies. Like,
yep.
Although I will say the preview of the next one that we got was looking pretty horrifying with like the living toys or anything. Yeah, pretty horrifying. But we'll be getting to that eventually in time,
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if this gets smoothed out at all. Like I wonder if this is just going to be the same thing that's going to happen 6 times in a row, where it's like we have a montage of previously on, and then we're thrust back to the resolution of that prior storyline, and then we finish that one and move on with half of our runtime gone. I don't really know what these are going to be like in that way, but I am actually, I'm not, I think we have gripes with the pacing of these for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are things to like here. And, I want to be complimentary about certain aspects of it as well. And I think I'm not going to put it past the series to smooth itself out a little bit in entries 3 through 6.
Yeah.
I have no real prior knowledge outside of like you said, the little preview of the next entry of what these are going to be like besides the poster art. And so, maybe someone listening to this wants to say, who's familiar with the whole series, in a Spotify comment, like what we have to look forward to or not look forward to after the fact. But I'm willing to give this the charity to go through the rest of the series and be willing to kind of wipe the slate clean each time, because I feel like this is one of the times I've kind of said this before, but we spend so much time talking about these ideas that don't come to fruition, like the Puppet Master prequels or trilogy, the Puppet Wars trilogy or something like that, where it's like, okay, we had an idea, this aspect of it got made. Okay, the poster got made, but we never had the budget to do that. And this is something that they pulled off in a way that I think resembles what they were going for. And I am just very curious if, do the other uh entries suffer because this is something that was written quickly and by committee. And I think when you're commissioned for, I mean, God, those syndicated shows had like 25 episode seasons.
Yeah.
Like you had a lot of time to smooth stuff out. And I mean, you go back and watch those first season episodes of Xena or Star Trek The Next Generation or something where it didn't really, again, it had ideas, it had the seeds, but it has some real issues.
It does.
And you might get a gem buried somewhere in there. But by and large, like, I feel like those series took a little bit of time to find their footing. And this could have been something that maybe took a little time to find its footing. Maybe we'll come back after our 3 and 4 episode and be like, wow, look at how well they righted the ship. I'm willing to be optimistic about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm willing to see it through. I'm not crazy excited about these first 2 movies, but like I think there's some stuff there that it could be fun to explore.
What I'm looking for, though, maybe even more than some of the other things we've covered in the past, is I'm looking for people who are fans of this series, people who saw this when they were new,
And they
people
exist,
who
yeah.
identify this as like as an integral part of their childhood, of their upbringing, of like their early consumption of media. Like if you're a Josh Kirby super fan, I'm sure there's somebody out there. Like I want to hear from you. So like email us at puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. Leave comments on Spotify for the episode saying what you love about the franchise, what you think they did right. If you disagree with our take on something here, by all means, like offer a counter argument for something. I am actually sort of very curious I mean, obviously it'll be a little while before we get to the 3, 4, and 5 and 6, just based on scheduling and stuff alone. I don't, I didn't necessarily dread this one the way I did with the remainder of the Evil Bongs. So I don't
Yeah.
view this as a rip the Band-Aid completely off situation, but I am kind of interested in seeing where this goes. And, well, after watching Oblivion and Oblivion 2, we were like, oh man, this had such great potential for a syndicated series. I think Oblivion is obvious, and Oblivion 2. I think I like Oblivion 2 more than 1. I think those were just super fun and maybe more successful in their overall attempt to present the world building and characters and stuff than this was. But this did get 6 features.
It did.
So maybe like, over the next 4, things will make more of an impression, and we'll be lamenting the fact that there wasn't 10 of this, or that there wasn't 25 of this, and that this wasn't, a syndicated series that you could have watched between Briscoe County Jr. and Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that about wraps it up for these 2. Where can people find our podcast and all this stuff?
Oh,
As
I
if
thought
they
you'd
don't
never
know.
ask. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they already know. But if this was your first time listening to the show, I just want to say thank you for supporting us and for jumping in. Obviously, most of the things that I always love episodes like this because for convenience, sometimes when I'm having conversations with people who are like horror people in the New York, they'll be like, oh, like Jared does a horror podcast. No, not really. Not exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and this is one of those times where we step outside of the horror and sci-fi genre, and those are always fun. But we do cover a lot of low budget horror and sci-fi on the show too, and we hit some pretty obscure stuff. So if you have a love of B movies and you grew up watching Full Moon, I know somebody on Blue Sky recently commented that they were thrilled to have found the show, didn't know it existed, didn't know anybody covered these movies. Well, here we are, and
Yeah.
we're doing it.
We're doing it.
Thank you for finding us. And if you want to now, keep up with us, the best way to do it is Instagram, probably. You can follow us at _Castle Freaks. You can follow me at _Giallo_Jared or Steve at Minotaur Matador. You can see posts about the show on Threads and Blue Sky. You can also listen to audio versions of it with a thumbnail on YouTube. YouTube, a lot of people are finding the show and listening to the show that way. So I don't want to, just toss it aside. It is a viable way to get the show. And maybe we'll beef that up at 1.2, but who knows? Because we're not the only show that Steve has to put energy into. So, Steve, what else would you like to plug?
Well, I would also like to plug my show Cinema Arcade, which is cinema and arcade mashed together. That is what we are doing on that show. We are watching movies and then playing the games based on those movies. I think around the time this episode's coming out, we're right in the Lord of the Rings, which is an unbelievable series. Amazing games, amazing movies, lots to really love there. We've also got a really fun, really odd episode on The Hustler from 1961. Which, yes, kind of, there is a video game. Our friend Diana Goodman came on that episode to talk about it because she is a classic movie nut, and couldn't have anybody better on that
perfect
episode.
guest for that.
Really fascinating story and kind of a fun pretzel logic I had to get into to make it fit into our show. But it kind of fits, and it was a great movie to revisit. I haven't seen it in years and years, and it's so good. So definitely check that out wherever you get your podcasts. And you know what? Also, I'm going to throw out a little plug for Desert Island Discs. I'm not sure if it's still being called that at this time, but
right.
We have been partnering up with the guys from Macabre Daily and Cradle from the Grave and author Robert Atone, and we have been talking about our Desert Island discs, different subjects of like what are favorite horror movies or best practical effects, a couple of other subjects coming up. We've had a lot of fun talking with those guys, and we're trying to make it a more regular thing.
Yeah, that's been super fun to record because it's like, everyone, horror podcasts and, people who write about horror movies, there are sort of things that end up getting covered quite often. So you would never be surprised to hear somebody talking about Halloween, hear someone talking about The Thing, hear someone talking about other like just really beloved movies. But the cool thing about doing a show like Desert Island Discs with 4 other people is that when you get to their second and third picks, you learn something new about the people and the subgenres of horror or even the non-horror movies that they revere. And so that's been really fun too, trying to guess, if it's best practical effects movie, is the other person going to pick a horror movie? And if they do, what do you think they're going to pick? And that's been really fun. And then having some of the picks come out and be really surprising has been a joy also. And just, great guys. So if you don't listen to Cradle to the Grave, you should. There's a bunch of episodes with me and Steve on there, but there's also a ton of other episodes with incredible guests and a really big guest crossover between that show and our show. So if you've heard like Becky Dark or Jerry J. Sampson, or I'm just like some of the other that we have shared so many guests with Cradle to the Grave.
We sure have.
You definitely will love to hear the discussions that they have with Eric on that show. And the guys from Macabre Daily are great and do a great job. There is a YouTube interview with Sean O'Connor with us talking about our show and some of our favorite horror movies and our favorite Full Moon and Empire movies. So if you, like I said, if you enjoy our show and you want to know where we also can be found on other shows and platforms, definitely we promo them on our social media, but Steve's right. We should plug them here too, because there's so much great stuff out there and you're going to find something that you love. I'll give it back to Steve in a second to let you know what we've got going on next week. But I just want to say, if you enjoy us, the best thing you can do to help us is to jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave a 5-star rating, and maybe write a review. I was reading something recently saying that like most people are only inclined to review a show if it's negative. And I find that to be true.
Yeah.
And I think, the more 5-star ratings we get and the more heartfelt reviews we get from wonderful listeners like yourself, just help us with more exposure, help the show reach a wider audience. And like, who wouldn't want a show to reach a wider audience that's covering, movies that other podcasts won't touch, like next week. Steve, what do we got coming up next week?
Oh boy, do we have a movie allegedly for you. We are talking about a film, I think this is 1988, correct?
Yep.
87, 88, and it's called Transformations. It's a Empire film, kind of a late Empire film that got picked up years later. It took a long time for it to actually get distribution. And it is a journey. It is a journey. I'm not going to say it's Tim Kincaid levels, but it's at least in Tim Kincaid's neighborhood. He lives in the same cul-de-sac as Robot Holocaust in a lot of those movies. So we've got a great guest, author Clay McLeod Chapman is going to be on the show, which is a super fun conversation for a deeply batshit movie. So we will see you all next week for Transformations. Now it's time to step into the time tunnel.
I think we should trademark that phrase and get that on some merch, on a t-shirt. Like, I forget exactly how you worded it, like a pretty great conversation for a deeply batshit movie. Because I feel like that describes
most of the things we cover.
99% of the episodes that we've done so far. So we can go back and find the exact wording, but you know what? Branding. I think it's about time.
Yeah, I think it's time. I think that's our whole vibe. Yeah. So we will catch you next week for that one, everybody. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Oh, we did that in unison.
Hey.